Okay, folks, it's 6:30 according to my clock. This is Greg, and we're going to get started here. We're actually winding down on our course. This is an 8-week session, and we have 2 more classes after this. So these are the last 3 classes, including tonight. I will have grades for your first 30-point assignment probably in a day or so. So if you check Blackboard, your grade should be in there, as well as your grade from your reflections, part 1 that was due in beginning of June. So you can take a look at those. And tonight we have another wonderful guest speaker. Jennifer Laban is joining us, and Jennifer is the manager of Terp Associates, an LLC that focuses on employee development. And Jennifer is also an author. She's written a book, Real World Training, and I believe she's also writing a chapter on another book coming up here shortly. And she might be working on something else too, another paper that or a chapter that I'm not aware of. Jen is a double alumni from UMBC. She received her bachelor's at UMBC in digital art and then her master's in instructional systems development. She also was a certified principal evaluator for Kirkpatrick Evaluation, a DISC and situational leadership facilitator, and probably lots of other things too that I'm not aware of. But Jen is also a member of our advisory board for our program, and what I want to do is turn it over to Jen. So Jen, I'm going to pass you the magic wand here.
All right.
And you'll get some sort of dialog box that says, do you want to be the presenter? And then you actually have to click on a little button, there you go, to show your screen, and I see your screen.
Great. Wonderful. All right, so I'm going to put this presentation up full screen. Hopefully everyone can see it. Good evening, everyone, and Greg, thanks again for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm so excited to be here. What I would really like to do is very quickly, I would love to get a sense of you all, just so that I can make sure I'm trying to gear my message appropriately. And I got your wonderful questions. They're amazing. So I'm going to try and spend about 30 minutes on the presentation and then some time afterwards to make sure I'm answering some of these great questions. I'm thinking if we can use the chat feature, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and then I'm just going to sort of scan your answers so that I get a little bit of a sense of who you are. The first question is going to be really easy. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, perfect. And then my next question is, and this is based on some of the questions that I got overall, regardless of where you are right now, if you are planning a career path where you're going to be internal to an organization, please type in the chat window internal. If you're planning on being an external consultant, please type external. Okay. Mostly internal, but some interest in external. Great, thank you. Okay. So some of you might already be where you want to be. Some of you might be moving out of there, but that really helps me. I'll balance this both. I will say that I believe consulting is consulting, and there's unique things to being an external consultant, but there's a need to be a true internal consultant. And a lot of what I want to talk about tonight is applicable to both worlds, certainly, but I think it's something that when we're internal, we don't always approach it consultatively. And so that's where we are now. As Greg mentioned, I do have a chapter out in the new ASCD handbook. It just launched in May. And that's what I'm going to present on tonight. The chapter is called You Want It When? Balancing Time, Quality, and Stakeholder Expectations. And so I took some thoughts from that chapter to present to you all tonight. You're our pilot group. No one else has gotten a presentation like this between me and my co-author. So so you all get the inside scoop for sure. As I mentioned, this is from the ASCD Handbook 2nd edition. And there were 96 authors contributed to this handbook. So it was a tremendous undertaking by the editor, Elaine Beat. If you haven't heard of Elaine, look her up. She's published more books than I think I know of anyone else in the industry. And one or two of you asked me about my mentors. Elaine has been my mentor for 5 or 6 years now, and I'll talk more about that in the Q&A period. But she's an incredible person with experience and expertise just above and beyond. So feel free to check her out. And my co-author with this chapter is Haleli Azaleh, who is an incredible consultant out of the Montgomery County area of Maryland. And she owns a company called Talent Grow, and that's talentgrow.com. So she's also got some amazing things up there, so I encourage you to check her out as well. As Greg said, I own and run TURP Associates, and it stands for Training, Engagement, Retention, and Performance. And I'll come back to more about me when I get to the questions. So for today, for this presentation part, I'm looking to help you with 3 very specific outcomes. Just so you know, I like to think about outcomes when we're talking about any given learning event versus objectives. Outcomes is much more business speak than objectives, and so when we're talking about working with our stakeholders, I'd rather use language that means something to them than academic. So I like to talk about outcomes. And the first outcome is that you will be able to identify 3 specific methods for managing stakeholder expectations. I have 3 different tools I'm going to share with you. You may have seen some of these before, but I consider them critical to projects. We're going to talk about 4 approaches to employee development outside of the classroom, and we're going to look at 4 opportunities for high-impact approaches to design. So we're looking at 11 different things to take away, 11 different outcomes at the end of this presentation. And I'll also keep an eye on the time here. So using your chat window, let's say, how does that sound to everyone for an agenda? Perfect. Okay. So first of all, project constraints. So we talked about project constraints. So we talked about the title of this. Everybody, make sure you have your mute on. I think there seemed to be an echo. Okay, great. The title of this is about balancing time, quality, and stakeholder expectations. And you can't really get into this topic without talking a little bit about project constraints. Does anyone know what the 3 project constraints are? Great. Yes, everybody's right. So we've got time. Time is a project constraint. This is time on 2 levels, time that it takes to get a project to market, and so it's time from the business level or from the organization level of we're going to miss our compliance unless it launches by such and such date, or it could be time as far as the time available, the bandwidth available from the team to put it together. So time for sure. Money, everybody got that. Money or budget. So how much is this going to cost us? And it's not just direct cost. For those of you who are internal, this is also the resource cost. So it might not be dollars, but what is it going to cost you? It might be opportunity cost as well. And then quality. And there's this saying that you can have it good, fast, or cheap. Pick 2. The reason that constraints are typically shown as a triangle is because you cannot manipulate all 3. You can't say we're going to have a project that's going to be perfect quality on a low budget with almost no timeline. You can't manipulate all 3 aspects. The most you can try and do is say, okay, let's prioritize here. Is the most important thing that this come in cheap and in time, because then we're going to have to give up some quality. which also, by the way, quality, that constraint is also about scope, so how large or complex the project is. Ideally, we can massage one and say, if you want a more complex e-learning deliverable, then it's going to cost you this much extra and it's going to take us this long. But very often you're dealing with at least two. One of the questions that came up, I think it came up a couple times, is how do you communicate to your stakeholders that what they're asking for is unreasonable? I think externally and internally, there's a point of being very blunt and honest about the impact certain decisions will have. So in saying, if you only have this much in your budget, this is the quality or the scope that we will be able to achieve. And by the way, we're putting at risk the objectives of this project. We're putting at risk the purpose that we were engaged to begin with. And so externally, what I consider myself to be a partner always. And part of my job is to make sure that my sponsor looks good at all times. And I will not allow them to look bad without saying, hey, here's the risk. We may not be able to deliver this in time unless we massage some of these constraints. So project constraints are really important. They drive the reality of the project. And I wrote the book Real World Training Design because what I noticed was that a lot of people would go through this wonderful ISD program, as I did, or read books or go through other programs and have a great idea of exactly how they were going to follow the ADDIE model and have these, fantastic ideas. But the reality of the situation is you very rarely get to go to a client, externally or internally, and say, oh, here's what you need, here's how long it'll take, here's how much it'll cost you, and here's the exact scope that you will get. No, very often you're getting that information given to you, and you have to negotiate from there. So that was sort of the buzz and the purpose for both the book and this. And Tracy, great question. Time and money are measurable. How do you define and measure quality? Those outcomes is one. So, I like to ask generically, what does success look like here? So for any given learning project, let's say it's a mentorship program, and I say, well, what does success look like? Well, one of the clients I was working with recently said, we just want them better assimilated into our culture. That's what we want out of this mentoring program. So great. So quality is measurements that I put in place to say they feel comfortable in the culture, they feel well acclimated. So quality is simply achieving that marker that was set out there in that case. In other cases, it might be more compliance-driven. So 100% of people can complete this task with zero error. Those ABCD objectives you guys have learned about already. So those are two ways to measure quality. And as I said, quality, that third constraint can also be scope. So you might want a holistic leadership development program with a stretch assignment and a mentorship and IDP tutoring or coaching and all of this. But really what you're talking about as far as time and budget, you're definitely not getting, two of those components. Tracy, did I answer your question? Great. Okay, so let's talk about stakeholder expectations and 3 tools to manage that. The first one is a stakeholder map. And a stakeholder map is simply a list of your stakeholders, which includes individuals. Typically, the higher up you go in a project, executive sponsor, VP, whatever, the more you're talking about individuals. And it also might include teams, so it might include your development team, or it might include your project office team. And then it might include functions. So, well, we need to get IT and HR involved, but we're not sure who from IT and HR yet, but we know IT and HR will be involved. So list of stakeholders, including those 3 different levels, the description of their role in the project, and I'm going to show you an example here in a moment, and very importantly, what we need from them. So do we need buy-in? Do we need approval? Do we need awareness, or them to have awareness? Do we need content from them? There's an acronym RACI. could catch up on my notes. I got so excited I kept going. You know, who is responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who needs to be informed, RACI, that you can use for this as well. We also want to know about perceptions and expectations, and I'll talk more about that in the next slide because that is probably the biggest thing with the stakeholder map that I think is skipped. And we want to talk about how we're engaging them. So let's look at how this plays out. This is obviously a partial, and I'll make sure, Greg, that you get these. I have a PDF of these slides so that you can share them with the class. I would send the PowerPoint, but I use a lot of pictures, and it's huge.
Okay, understood.
Okay, so, and I realize this gets cut off a little bit, but I'm going to walk through a couple of points here. So look at our top line. In this example, fictional organization, looking at a leadership development program, and the CEO is going to be our first stakeholder. What's the CEO's role in the project? Well, she's got the final approval for the very big milestones because she's in it, because she wants this. And we need to inform her monthly how we're doing. That's her role. She wants to be informed monthly. Okay, great. What do we need from the CEO? Well, in this case, we're going to need guidance on the philosophy of the program, just to make sure we're on the right track. And we're also, as we previously said, we're going to need approval. The perceptions and expectations, and this is the part that I said is really important to think about. What already exists in the stakeholder's mind, or as noise, if you're talking about like a team or a department or a function, what already exists that could either be a boon or a hindrance to this project. So what we find out from our CEO by doing our due diligence is that the CEO is currently unhappy with the candidate pool that is driving this entire project and wants measurable improvement after 18 months. There is our #1 project constraint, time. Because in order to see measurable improvement after 18 months, the development time on this project is going to be incredibly short to put things in place so that they have time to have impact on that measurable. And then the final column here is where do we engage her? We need her in the kickoff meeting because this is really, when it comes down to it, it's her project. We already said we're going to communicate with her monthly. And we know that she prefers hard copies. I'm sorry it is cut off. It might be cut off for you guys, but we find out that she prefers hard copies to review, hard copy deliverables. That may not sound important, but the more you know about your stakeholders, about your clients, internally or externally, the better off you're going to be because you're delivering on their expectations. That's what makes projects successful more than anything else, is delivering on their expectations. I'm not going to go through the whole next line, but there's a couple of pieces I want to pick out. So here's our HR director. He's the project sponsor for us, and he committed, he's the one, if you look under perceptions and expectations, he committed to the CEO a successful leadership development program within 18 months. He's our sponsor as the development team, and that's a commitment he made. One of our top jobs, maybe #1, maybe #2 jobs, is to make our sponsor look good, and so that's what we have to hit. Let me show you a couple more points, different lines, a couple more people, audiences, and then I'll stop to see if there's any questions about this. So we're talking about a leadership development program, a HIPO program. So of course, HIPOs are a group of stakeholders. The previous two examples, those were individuals. But now we're talking about our target audience, which are high potential employees. What do we need from them? We need to know their expectations for this program, what already exists out there. That's really big. I can't say it enough. Your expectations are what's going to make or break the project, and addressing those expectations, or finding out that the expectations might be misled. We're going to need them to review the content, and we're going to need them to pilot the group. And what perceptions or expectations already exist with this group? They want to be involved in this. Well, that's great because we want free labor because we don't have the time on this project. We don't have the time to do everything ourselves. So if we have people who want to be involved, let's use them. And then the last line is the managers of the high potentials. And what I really wanted to say here is that managers of your target audience for any given learning project or any given learning event, managers of that target audience are typically overlooked. And if there's any group that you really need to make sure you have buy-in from, ownership, I would really stress remembering the supervisors of that target audience, because they're going to be the ones who have opinions on how much time away from the office their people can take or exactly what their people need. They want to be consulted typically, and so don't leave them off of the stakeholder map. As far as overall, when you're using this tool, remember perceptions and expectations are important because you don't want to find anything out later, right? You don't want to find out that your VP of operations, who used to be VP of HR, had started a project on exactly the same thing, and then she's going to get upset that no one consulted with her. You don't want to find that out later. You don't want to find out later that someone had a very clear vision of what the mentoring program was going to look like, and you started going along and being the greatest partner you could and went down a very different path, and then you lost the buy-in from someone who was critical to the project. So perceptions and expectations, uncover them early. And then as far as points of engagement, think about this, especially when you're talking about individuals. Do they prefer data, or are they quantitatively driven or qualitatively driven, right? I have clients who prefer me to email them a set of bullet points. I have other clients who want me to come to the office and hand them a 3-page report. You know, what do they prefer? Hard copy, soft copy, qualitative, quantitative? So the more you know about how your audience or your stakeholders like to receive information, the better off you're going to be. And always ask your sponsor, what did they already promise? What has already been put out there that might be setting expectations right now that you have to deliver on? Okay, so a couple of questions. How do you manage unrealistic perceptions and expectations, and how can you minimize blind spots when it comes to engaging stakeholders? Okay, managing unrealistic perceptions and expectations. So I think there is no silver bullet, right? There have been clients that, for projects, that I have had that haven't gone well because I haven't been able to overcome that. However, there's no magic answer. But what I have found to be effective in most cases with most reasonable people is making sure that, A, I credibly and authentically partner with them from the beginning, and then I'm honest with them from the beginning. Lou Russell, who you all probably have her book from being in the program, the project management guru for this space, she says bad news early is good news, right? So I never let anyone be surprised. If something's coming up and it's going to surprise them or it's going to be bad news, I let that person know as soon as possible, and I don't just come with the bad news. I make sure I have the solution ready to go. So that's one thing. Be a partner, communicate often, communicate frequently, even communicate the bad news. I'm honest about what's reasonable and what's not. I have to tell my partners, my clients, I hear what you're asking, and I think that would be a great project, but you don't have it in this budget, and I'm going to have to cut something to meet the budget. So let's talk about what that can be without taking away too much value. I always have to be honest, because if I'm not honest, then that's going to come back to bite me. It's going to make me less credible as a partner, as a professional. And yes, I have to walk away from some projects. One of my mentors told me early on that the less someone's paying you, the less reasonable they're going to be, right? So I find that when I do, other than this, Greg, when I do something, voluntarily, I get a lot more demands than if someone's paying me to do something. So keep that in mind too. You have to price yourself accordingly. You have to know what your value is, and sometimes you just bite the bullet. So I'm trying to think, I can't think of the specific instance, but there's been a couple of times where I underestimated how long the project was going to take. I priced it according to how long I thought it would take, and I was off by a significant amount, enough that it mattered. And I was not going to go back to that client and say, hey, I messed up, you need to give me more money. That was my mistake, and that's something I'm going to take on. On the other hand, I have to say, from the very beginning, if we're partnering and if I know who my stakeholders are and I can have that conversation, I can say, here's the constraints, here's what's important, and they say, well, we can't, that's not where we are, then they need to find a different partner, because I'm not going to put my reputation on the line for something that's unreasonable. I hope that answered that question. Minimize blind spots when it comes to engaging when it comes to engaging stakeholders. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Err on the side of over-communicating. Ask, if you need to communicate with the C-suite and you don't have access to the C-suite, ask every other highest level person you can get to, how does that person like to receive their information? Do they like pretty charts? Do they like bullet points? Do they want me to call them? Do they want me to show up at their office? How do they like it? So communicate in every way possible, because that will make or break it. The other thing about minimizing blind spots is risk management. The bigger the project, the longer and more complicated the project, the more necessary it becomes to do a risk management project. Also, the less familiar you are with the content area. I've done, I've helped implement somewhere around a dozen formal mentorship programs. At this point, I don't typically need to do a risk management plan, but I have much less experience in succession planning. So if I was going to go take on a succession planning contract right now, you bet I'm going to do a risk management, and I'm going to pull in some of my peers to look over it to make sure that I'm hitting all of that. I know what might come up that might blindside me. Okay, let's move on, and I won't spend quite as long on these, but project initiation meeting, this is going to be based on your stakeholder map. So if you did your stakeholder map, then you know who to invite. Every project should have a project initiation meeting. However, it's not always possible to have it before the project starts. Sometimes you need to just say, okay, the project started, we're a couple weeks in, we're still going to have this initiation meeting, because this creates transparency across your most critical stakeholders. Speaking about avoiding blind spots and managing expectations, you as the single internal or external consultant can't always manage that politically. And so getting the key stakeholders into a room or a virtual room to have a project initiation meeting is going to help alleviate some of that stress and some of that pressure so that you don't end up being the scapegoat. The purpose is to share critical information and create that transparency. It's also to create a shared vision of success. Again, you don't want your CEO thinking that you're going to Toledo and your HR director thinking you're going to Amarillo. So make sure that everyone agrees on what success looks like during this meeting. You can hold it virtually for sure. You can hold it in person. If you're going to hold it in person and you can manage to get your project initiation meeting external from the typical workspace, if it's a very small project, maybe even at a Starbucks, that'll help alleviate some of the distractions. It'll help reduce the person who has, oh, I'm sorry, I have this meeting I couldn't say no to, right? Because if they're not on location, then they're going to be more picky about what they do. This is what you'll get is a sample agenda of what a project initiation meeting might look like. This is for the leadership development program that I'm just continuing that example from before. The bigger and more complex your project, the longer this meeting will take, as a general rule. And once you figure out how long you think it'll take, pad it a lot, because when you have the most opinionated people in the organization coming together to talk about this, they are going to want to hear themselves talk, and it's going to take a while to negotiate that space. Scheduling is going to be the hardest part. So get your executive sponsor the highest person you can get your hands on, to send out the invite and stress how important it is for your invitees to be there. Don't let it come from you, particularly if you're an external consultant. And to get people to show up, make sure they know that if they don't show up, and do this politically and diplomatically, not the way I'm saying it, but make sure they know if they don't show up, their workload can change. They will be impacted. Jobs could change, or job descriptions could change, or they might miss an opportunity to weigh in on the direction of the project. Whatever it is, that's realistically what they might miss out on. Make sure that that's addressed in that invitation. Okay. And the third tool around managing stakeholder expectations is a communication plan. I've said it before, communicate early and often. This communication plan is going to be based on the stakeholder map, so you know who to communicate with. And it's going to be based off of the results of the project initiation meeting, so you know what to communicate to them about and their preferences. Here's an example. You see all the tools I use are very simple. I try and make sure that people can reproduce these with just a simple table in Microsoft Word. There's nothing fancy. But talking about each phase of the project, so in this example, and this is a partial example, this would look much more robust for a real project, but I list the project initiation and planning, so what communication has to happen there for each of my stakeholders. How am I going to update them on regular progress? That's listed here. And who reviews and approves my deliverables? That's here as well. And then I have one more project phase in the last column, which is the pilot phase. In reality, I'd probably put each major milestone in as a column and talk about what deliverables, what communications need to go out, but for the purpose of putting it on the screen, I only put a couple in like that. The benefits of all of these tools, all three of these tools, the stakeholder map, the project initiation meeting, and the communication plan, are all around engagement, ownership, transparency, and managing those expectations. Getting people involved early, giving them a voice, makes all the difference in the success of a project. It slows things down at the beginning, but it really helps people get buy-in into the process. It gives you credibility down the road. It gives you a boost down the road when you're looking for facilitators or you're looking for pilot groups. It saves you time in the end, so I can't stress it enough. Whether it's these tools or other tools, make sure that you're thinking about that expectation piece way ahead of time. So that took, because you guys have such great questions, that took a little bit longer than I expected, but let me pause and see where you all are right now. Any questions on that section or thoughts there? Okay, good. Okay, so I'm going to breeze through this next section, but what I'm going to do, actually, Greg, I'll give you the PDF of the slides, but I'm going to give you the PDF of my notes also. And that way I can get to some of your questions. And if you all have follow-up questions, you can just email me, and I'll make sure that I cover anything with you that you might want to. All right, so 4 approaches to employee development outside of the classroom. Too often, we jump to training as the answer. Training, this is a simplification, but training is only the answer when someone needs to learn something new, right? And that isn't always the case. We only need to train them if they haven't done it before. If they were doing it successfully and then they stopped, we need to look at other things. It might be motivation. It might be the environment. It might be a new boss. And we tend to just say, oh, you need time management training. Or we tend to listen to our sponsors and our clients who say, we need time management training. And then when you dig into it, you think, no, your team needs to come together and resolve some dynamic issues. So rather than jumping to training, and especially when it comes to thinking about bang for the buck and return on value, really thinking about other ways to develop your employees. And when it comes to being consultative, again, both internally and as an external consultant, it really falls on us to increase the awareness of our clients that training isn't usually the answer, but there are a lot of ways to get to a great, impactful development opportunity. These are cost-effective, they're high impact, and they take very little administrative work for the most part. And so very briefly, I'll go through. The first one is self-directed learning. And we overlook it. Self-development is key, and the more you're talking about the younger generations, the more they're used to this self-development. So let's leverage that. Let's talk about that informal ability to learn and develop oneself. Whether it's reading books or blogs or listening to podcasts, watching TED videos or other videos on YouTube, or even something a little bit more traditional like having an informational interview or finding a role model and shadowing that person. If you're looking for something function-specific or very technically specific, looking at professional associations, conferences, and trade publications. For us, in our field, we can go to ATD. Still going to be weird saying ATD instead of ASTD for a while, but we could go to ATD and find a ton of resources to help us get started that are all for free. And it just takes a little bit of search. And by the way, my #1 resource database out there is Google. I go, what's something? Oh, how do other people demonstrate a stretch assignment overview? And I'll just do a stretch assignment overview in Google, and I'll browse through the images to get an idea of how I set up the format for that. So self-directed learning, really key. Because there are few restraints, the options are limitless. But however, you do need to engage with supervisors at this point to make sure that the employee is really targeted at the right things and getting the right information. The benefits is that it encourages someone's responsibility and ownership over their own experience, and it promotes control for that person. It's a pull mentality rather than a push mentality. May not be a great fit for some people who feel like they're going to be learning in a vacuum, and we'll talk about how to deal with that in a moment. How could this knowledge be reported on a resume, or should we rely on certification? Great question. So this is very specific to the industry you work in. So if you're internal, let's say, and you're in manufacturing, you develop learning, you develop your employees in the manufacturing space, or hundreds of other combinations out there. But I find that you can report, employees more and more are learning something, some new skill, or they want to get involved with something, or they challenge themselves, the self-directed learners out there. They will do it, they'll take on a stretch assignment, or they'll try out a project at work, and they'll put it on their resume. And it becomes a part of who they are, a part of the skill set that they offer, the value that they offer as an employee. The certification piece, and that was one of your questions as well, is what certifications are out there. The CPLP, for us, is certainly gaining momentum, and a lot of people are out there. The certification piece is tricky because a lot of certifications they get obsolete. Like talking about a talent management certification, every couple of years that space transforms itself. So saying that I was certified as or I got a certification in talent management 4 years ago doesn't really mean much anymore. But maybe to your specific organization or to your specific client, maybe that does. So the more technical or compliance-driven the industry, the more that certificate matters. Otherwise, it's really a matter of how you capture the post-event information. So let me talk about that for a moment, and then I'll come to, Patrick, then I'll come to your question. According to a study done by Brent Peterson of Columbia University, 25% of our potential to change and improve our behavior comes during the learning event. 25%, only a quarter of our potential to really learn comes during any given learning event, and that could be during a job shadow, a mentorship conversation, listening to a video, going to a class, any of those things, 25%. How much of that potential do you all think, and you can use your chat window, how much of that potential can be attained before the event? If anyone has any guesses. So Patrick thinks that it might be 50% before the event. A lot of guesses. Okay, so these are great guesses. So another 25% happens before the event. Now, we spend all of our money on the event itself, almost all of it, and maybe we spend a few resources financially or time or whatever getting the pre-work in order for a class. But we don't spend a lot of time on the prep piece, the pre-event piece for mentorships and stretch assignments and self-directed learning and things like that because we don't really know what to do there because that is a undefined space for most people. And so what we're doing is we're spending all of our money on the 25%, 1/4 of the potential for that change to happen. And maybe some of those resources on the pre-event piece, which is only another 25%. Half of that potential, 50%, comes post-event. So reflection is key. Finding some way, whether it's teaching that back, asking, trying the skill and then asking for feedback, coming back through the evaluation process six months later to find out how that person is doing and giving them those scores, putting it in your Outlook calendar to follow up on. Whatever that is already potentially doubling the ability for your learner, for you, to make a difference, to have a sustainable change. So why am I bringing this up? Because self-directed learning is really all about the post-event. I like to tell people in my programs, leadership development programs, they always come to me and say, well, what have you been working on for your IDP? And they'll say, oh, I read this book last month. And I'm like, great, so what did you do with it? Right? So reading a book isn't going to change anything. But what did you do with that information? Did you meet with someone else who read that book and talked about it? Did you write down the 3 takeaways and practice them every day? What did you do afterwards? Because that's where half of your potential comes in. Okay, so the question was about badges. I have found in my very limited experience with anything under the gamification umbrella, I'm not even sure if that's still the best word to use, but I have found that the broader and more junior the target audience, the more receptive someone might be for that. But I wouldn't pitch that to the VP level in any of the organizations I work with, except that you also have to consider if it's a sales organization, they may be very competitive, and maybe they will. It's really going to depend on that specific organization's culture. I'm sorry, I don't think I have a better answer for that. Let me know if you want to. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, so that's self-directed learning. Mentoring, I can't talk about mentoring enough, but I need to keep moving. Mentoring is one of my favorite topics in the entire world. I love helping with mentoring programs. So what you'll get here is a partial list of benefits of mentoring programs. And you will also get this statistic. It is actually kind of difficult to come by real hard numbers around the benefits of mentoring. And so this is one that I like to share with everyone. Mentoring, according to this one article, or this one firm, rather, increased sales productivity by 14%, reduced hiring and training costs by 18%, and reduced customer erosion by 21%. Gee, if I could keep 21% more of my clients, reduce my cost by 18%, and boost my sales by 14%, I would take that in a heartbeat. I would spend any amount of money to make sure that happened. So this is a great little proof point if you're thinking about putting together, if you think mentorship is a good option for what you're working on, keep in mind this proof point, because that goes a long way for quantitative thinkers. I teach a series for ASTD called The Essentials of Developing a Mentoring Program. This is one slide that captures an entire hour-and-a-half session, so I won't go through it in detail, of the mentoring programs. But essentially, when you're thinking about developing a formal mentoring program, you want to think along what the structure is going to be, what the schedule is going to be, and how am I going to engage the participants, both mentees and mentors. Okay, so question around mentorship. What method of mentorship do you use? Let me come back to that at the end when I'm answering other questions, because there's a whole lot of different types of mentoring out there, and it depends on what your goal is. So I'll come back to that. And then we're talking about stretch assignments. Stretch assignments are key if you have support in the organization. They can increase engagement, they can stimulate creativity, they can increase retention, all for very, very little resources. So high impact, low cost, but also it produces real results for the organization. So it produces value at the same time that it's developing the employees. So stretch assignments can be incredibly valuable. In here you'll also get, this is directly from the chapter, a rotation readiness checklist. And the fourth development is teaching others. Don't underestimate the ability to grow someone by teaching others. To teach is to learn. Anyone can design a brown bag session. They just have to figure out something they're passionate about, and they can offer a lunch. And this is really effective for a variety of development goals, such as presentation skills, professionalism, communication, comfort around higher management, command skills, a whole lot. So teaching others is huge. And some examples here are being a subject matter expert, being a role model, facilitating or co-facilitating, co-presenting, contributing to your organization's blog or to an article on your intranet, and group mentoring potentially as well. Okay, one quick other checklist tool I wanted to provide you before I dive into your questions. What you will get here is a list of metrics. Evaluation is so important, and so many of us just don't do it very often. Our clients or our sponsors don't have an appetite for it. And sometimes we don't even approach it because it's scary and daunting. So this is a very small list of measurable information that applies to level 1 through level 4 evaluation. I'm assuming that you all know the 4 levels. I'm not going to go into any of that. If you don't, contact me later. But here's a couple of tricks as far as high impact, low cost, and streamlining your process. I typically like to launch my level 1 and level 2 combined evaluation. So at the end of any given learning event, again, mentoring programs being a great example, if it's a 6-month or 12-month mentoring program, at the end of that time, I send them one tool, typically a survey, that will cover my level 1 questions and my level 2 questions. So you combine resources there. Also, level 2 and level 3 double duty. So whatever you're measuring at level 2 should be the same thing, essentially, that you're measuring at level 3. It's just that it's in a different environment. So you should use the same tool, probably with a few tweaks. But if I am measuring IDP goal progress at level 2, then when I come back to that person 3 and 6 months later, I still want to find out if they're still at the same level they were with the IDP goals. And I could go on and on. So you have here level 1 through 4, some ideas. No matter what, when you're evaluating any learning opportunity, any employee development project, measure the stated goal of your program. Why were you brought onto this project to begin with? What were you trying to impact? Was it retention? Was it culture? Was it a technology change project? You're trying to just build awareness and knowledge around how to use the technology. Whatever it was, make sure that's what you're measuring at the end of the day. That's where it all starts. And work backwards. It's a whole lot easier to design an evaluation plan starting with your level 4 and moving backwards to level 1 than starting at level 1. It sort of starts to write itself. Okay, I tried to cram a whole lot into there, guys. I love talking about this stuff, but before I answer any other questions that you sent in, any other questions about the presentation itself so far? Okay. Greg, how long do I have to answer some of the questions they sent in?
We finished the class at 9 o'clock.
Okay. All right, Larry wants to know about speed mentorships. That's funny because I just had a conversation with someone about this. Larry, can I ask you what you think speed mentorship, where the benefit is? That's not a leading question. Like, what do you think about it? Well, and we'll look at the answer. And while you're doing that, I'll put this up on the screen and see if Larry, you can send an answer through chat. This is my my website, terpassociates.com. That's a cover picture of my book. And my email address, which somehow I managed to not put on this slide, is Jen, J-E-N-N, @terpassociates.com. I will put it in the chat window. And I think this should get to everybody. Okay, so Larry, let me see. Time is not available. We need help to make an impact. Here's what I think about speed mentoring. I think that a speed mentoring session, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is kind of like speed dating. So there isn't time for a real, true, formal mentoring relationship where you get to know each other and you establish trust and you can get to a deep level. So it doesn't have the same kind of impact. It can't have the same kind of impact as other types of formal mentoring programs. Having said that, it has its place. At ASCD's International Conference, they love to have speed mentoring sessions. And that works really well as long, again, it's about expectations, I think. Because you can't have someone come in and spend 30 minutes describing the context of their situation and then ask for guidance when you only have a 15-minute session to begin with. So it has to be set up that that both parties understand what's to be expected of them, that the person being mentored understands that they're probably going to receive advice. They might receive contacts and networking information, which is very valuable, but they're not going to get to a level where that other person truly understands their individual situation. If you can frame that up appropriately, then I think speed mentoring has its place. But if you're looking at true long-term growth and change, then the speed mentoring is probably not the ideal thing. However, if you are looking for more of a speed dating result, if you're looking for a whole bunch of names and numbers and who I contact for this, and you can have speed dating at an organizational event like cross-functional event, maybe a lunch, and you find out, oh, so-and-so is in charge of this business line, and I've really been meaning to find out more about that. That's a great application for it. So hopefully, Larry, that made sense to you. Okay, so I'm going to look at some of your questions here. These are such great questions. Let me just, there was a couple of mentoring questions, but I tried to pick out a couple from each one of you. How long are mentor-mentee relationships when you design a mentoring project? For formal programs, okay, I keep differentiating because there are informal programs that work very, very well. But for formal mentoring programs, I like to think about mentoring programs on a spectrum. All the way to the left, we have the new hire mentoring program where someone comes into an organization and they need to learn about the culture of the organization and how things work, and they sort of need to be sponsored into that environment, and they don't know what they don't know. And sometimes those are very much geared towards sort of new professionals. So maybe not someone who's been out there in the workforce for a couple of decades and now new into the organization. Maybe not that person, but maybe one client I work with, the average age there is like 26. So they're onboarding 22 and 23-year-olds constantly. And so their new hire mentorship program is very much very prescriptive, okay? So if we're going to talk about this on this conversation and this on this conversation, et cetera, et cetera. That's all the way on one side of the spectrum. On the other side of the spectrum, we have executive coaching type relationships, where you have one person in that senior VP spot who is looking at growth and development around one specific area, and they find a mentor, probably externally, to help them grow and develop in that area. That is very mentee-driven, right? That's exclusively mentee-driven. That person, that executive who's working on something very intangible needs to run that relationship, and it needs to be a long-term relationship, because I like to think the squishier the topic, the squishier the content, the longer it needs to go before that behavior starts to change. So if you think about that spectrum, the further to the one side, the new hire side you are, the more prescriptive it's going to be, the more structured it's going to be, probably the shorter it's going to be, and the more driven by either sort of a corporate function or by the mentor. And then the more you go towards the other side, the more it's going to be driven by the mentee and longer. Do I have a team of instructional designers, or is it just me? And how am I able to meet high demand with clients? So, Herb Associates is just me. However, I have a network of partners that I bring onto projects as needed. And likewise, these partners have their own organizations, their own companies, and they bring me on to their projects as needed. This is an arrangement that works really well for me, because I do like to take on projects of various size, and I don't ever see my company being to the point where I need to have several full-time employees. That's not really my goal with Herb Associates. My goal is to partner with great people and great organizations. And so I need flexibility with that. So I have a couple of instructional designers I work with pretty regularly. I have one graphic designer I work with regularly, and I'm currently looking for another graphic designer. I have a OD and talent management expert that I work with quite a bit. I have an executive coach I work with quite a bit. So people who are in my network that have demonstrated not only that we work well together, but that they can represent me and my company well to the organization. That's critical. And so I bring on the people I need for the contracts I need, and that works really well. I can't stress enough how important it is to have a network in this industry, to know people, and not just really well-known names either, because that's not going to get you very far, but to find people who are brilliantly talented and get to work with them on a project. That's I think that's one of the greatest joys of this industry. It's just amazing. Let's see. What project am I most proud of? I really like this question. There isn't a specific project. If I had to say a project, I'd say it's the most recent leadership development program I built, because it took 2 years and it was very robust, and at some point I feel like I thought of everything. But the things I'm proud of most are not projects. I'm most proud of my coaching accomplishments. I get to make an impact one-on-one with my coaching clients. People who reach out to me, they're growing in a certain area, they're developing in a certain area, and they want someone to work with them on that. And I get to see real change there, and that impact is just invaluable. I'm also very, very proud of all of my writing. I do have a book out and a chapter out and several white papers in the Pfeiffer Annuals, and I just recently pitched my second book. So I'm proud of that as well. So it's not even the client project that kind of rise to the top as much as the impact that I feel like I can make on my peers. Tell us a little bit about the Certified Principal Evaluator certification. This is a certification that doesn't actually exist anymore. I was lucky enough to be consulting for a company in Northern Virginia who at the time was also working with Jim Kirkpatrick. This was before he married Wendy. And so he was a consultant for them, and I was a consultant for them. And they had him create this certification around Kirkpatrick, the Kirkpatrick model. And he offered it, and they offered it first to their consultants before they started charging people to get certified. And so I got to be trained by Jim Kirkpatrick directly, and it was wonderful. And later he left. He was no longer working with that organization, and I wasn't either. And since then, of course, the Kirkpatrick partners, him and Wendy particularly, have reinvented that certification, and they've redesigned the Kirkpatrick model a little bit as well. So I keep in touch with him and Wendy, and I keep saying I'm going to go through the new certification so I could change the title of it. But when I mentioned earlier that certifications go stale, well, there you go. This one doesn't even exist anymore. It was basically being certified in the Kirkpatrick 4 model. And let's see. Patrick, I love this question. How do you view failure? Failure is when I don't meet expectations or I don't partner with the client on the success that they wanted to see. So I have done work that wasn't super exciting, but that's what the client needed and that's what they wanted, and at the end of the day they were happy. That was still a win. I have done work that, talking about constraints, I did quick, I did cheap, but we hit the target. Okay, that was still a win because we all agreed on what the success was at the beginning. I've also walked in where I felt like I wasn't going to be able to achieve that win, that partnership was going to be too imbalanced. And so I just, I had to walk away from that. So failure is not being a good partner. Do you act as a designer and project manager, or are these two separate roles? It depends on the size of the project. I think there are very complex, very long employee development projects out there that require those to be separate roles. Most of what I do both. When I've been internal at various places, I have found that there isn't a separate project manager, unless you're talking about, say, like a global LMS, rollout or something like that. But I find that those tend to be together. You need to have both skills. And even if you aren't officially the project manager, but you are the designer on a project, I find that the more project management skills you have, the better off you're going to be, even if that's not officially your job. Another question here is, when creating leadership courses, do you find that classroom delivery is more effective than web-based? I've had a hard time getting senior leaders into web-based training. Discussion elements of leadership training may lend themselves better to the classroom setting. I agree. I think, again, if you think about that spectrum, the squishier the topics, like leadership development topics, when you're talking about strategic thinking and command skills and some of these things that we expect from our leaders, that is much more difficult to A, teach remotely, and B, teach in a vacuum. So if we're talking about e-learning modules, no, I don't think that you can develop some of those real leadership skills that way, at least not entirely that way. But if you're talking about how to fill out your expense report, yes, you can do that through that. So I'm not sure that it has everything to do with the level of the audience, so that clearly plays into it, but I think it's the subject matter. Recently, there at this one client, they released a compliance training, and the modules were great. I mean, they were engaging and they were interactive, and they were really great. And every person in the company needed to take them, and it took about 45 minutes. So the people in that company, regardless of their individual contributor, managers, directors, executives, what have you, they needed to take that 45-minute online training, and no one complained because it was engaging, but also because the content lent itself to that format. I think we get pretty excited about what's possible, and we tend to get enamored with, well, how can I use this tool, instead of remembering that we're really our learners' advocates, and we need to figure out what the problem is and what the ideal solution is before we start picking a tool to do that with. Great. Okay, so what do you say to clients who argue that time spent on analysis should be kept to a minimum and instead development time should be maximized? I like to make sure that my clients know what the risks in that are. So if you are working with an audience you know well, in an organization you know well, the skill set or content area that you know well, yeah, sure. Well, we can break that analysis way down to almost nothing because there's no risk here. But if any of those things are new, then I want to make sure that my partners know, again, internally or externally, that the risk in skipping this is that we might miss the boat. That the entire reason that we're here is to increase retention or to, fill in the blank of what the goal is. And unless we do the analysis, we may not hit that goal. And if you're okay with that, partner, then I'm okay with that. But I need to tell you up front that that's the risk. Question about SAM over ADDIE. Okay, so funny story. I did this book, Real World Training Design, and very excited about it. It's actually going to be a series for ATD now. And they have Patty Phillips, I think, doing real world evaluation. So so great. I was really excited about this book. It's a visual book, and I based it on the ADDIE model. And the Leaving ADDIE for SAM book by Michael Allen got released at the same time that the same publisher released my book, which was based on the ADDIE model. So I have to laugh because, and I've actually introduced myself to Michael Allen and told him this story. So, it's like, come on, guys, you could have given me a heads up. But the SAM methodology versus ADDIE methodology, I think it's directionally great. Do I think it's going to replace ADDIE? Maybe. From what I understand, SAM is especially impactful and especially valuable when working with e-learning projects. I don't know that, I think it's still valuable for any kind of learning project, but specifically, I believe that he originally developed it for more of those types of projects. Here's what I will say about any kind of methodology you choose. I think it's important to know and be aware of a methodology. I think it's important to know it inside and out so that you can break it. I have never followed ADDIE to the point of saying, first we're going to do analysis, and then we're going to do design, and then we're going to do development. These things always have to overlap. There has to be more of an iterative design approach because it is the real world. And, by the way, rapid prototyping has been around forever, and it's not just in our industry. So putting together a piece of the puzzle, having one group of people work on the corner of a puzzle and another group work on the left side of the puzzle, and then another group is trying to find that Dalmatian in the middle, that's how reality works. And that's how real learning projects work. So it doesn't matter if you're following ADDIE, if you're trying to follow SAM or one of the other models. That's fine. Just pick a framework, but then know where it's flexible. Know where you can break it know where you can intentionally skip steps or reduce steps. Make it yours so that the project doesn't suffer from being too academic. Hopefully that helped answer your question. A couple questions about my book, which of course I would love to talk about. My book is called, like I said, it's Real World Training Design. Greg was kind enough to write a blurb for the back of it. Thank you again, Greg. And it's a visual, it's intended to be a visual quick start guide for instructional design. And what I noticed, I was mentoring a lot of newer instructional designers out there. And they had some great ideas coming out of school or being new to the profession or having come across, just applying for a job like this and just making a career switch. And these folks have some great ideas. But when it came to actually the last thing I was talking about, where it's sort of, you know academically how it's supposed to go, you know in theory how it's supposed to go, but it's not going that way, being able to adapt to some of those constraints, they were struggling with that part a little bit. It was a little bit of a culture shock. And I found myself doing literal back of the napkin drawings and trying to explain these things visually over and over again. And so I realized there has to be a book in there. And so I wrote Real World Training Design, and I'm very proud of it because ASTD, my editor will tell you that they had never published anything like that before. It is intended to be a book that you can open up to any page. It's highly visual. Every page has a graphic or a model or at least an image with text at the very least that says, here's something you can use. So I wanted something that someone could keep on their desk, open up to a random page, and be reminded of a useful tool. And it's a toolkit bound in a book, and that was the point of it. So thank you for the questions. It talks about really most pieces of the instructional design world to some extent. I wrote it for new instructional designers. I also wrote it for people who were looking for a little bit, who were maybe more tenured in the industry, but looking for a little bit of inspiration. So that's what the book is about. Did you have a mentor? What were the biggest lessons you learned from them? So I mentioned at the beginning that Elaine Beek is one of my mentors, and she's been around for in my life for a few years, and she has taught me a few things. As a professional, she has taught me that it takes just as much work to land a big contract as it does to land a small contract. She's taught me that I was underpricing myself. And she's taught me, she's also sort of made me wake up to how much a person can do. Elaine actually writes all of her books. So I mentioned, I think she has like 24 books. I'm not exaggerating. And she writes all of her books in 2 weeks, each one of her books. She goes away for 2 weeks and writes it. It took me a year to write my book, by the way. So she's just a role model for me, and she pushes me, and she brings me in on things. So yes, 2 weeks. She writes a book into each one of her books in 2 weeks, and they're not nice little graphics like mine are. They're thick books. So that's what I learned from her, and then I've got some other folks who are mentors and coaches, and I think you need a board, and I think it's Marcus Buckingham who said, who sits on your board of directors, and who's your chairperson. I make sure I think about that. Who's on my board? Who are my sponsors? Who are my challengers? Who are the people I go to when I'm just frustrated? So think about who's on your board, and make sure that they know that you're on your board. Let them know that they've made such an impact in your life, and that you plan on continuing to have them in your life, and that they're on your board. How did I get Elaine? I did. I just went up to her and I asked her, can you be my mentor? I must have caught her on a good day, because I'm not exaggerating. People ask her all the time. So, she she agreed, but along those lines, like if you're going to find someone to be your mentor in this industry, and they're fairly well known, or at least in these circles, if you're going to go out on that limb, you better make sure that you own that relationship. So in 6 years, or so, I don't actually remember, but the first several years, Elaine never had to reach out to me to wonder where I was. And I never let more than a couple months go by before she heard from me, because her investment in me, her being my mentor, had to start with my own investment in myself. And she had to see that I was very motivated, and that I was going to, I was going to invest in myself so that she could invest in me. And I think that's what it's all about being a mentor. No matter where you are in your career, and no matter who your mentor is, they don't have to be someone higher or richer or more experienced than you. It's just someone whose opinion and you trust and who can help you facilitate through those situations. So I have been doing so much talking over the last almost hour and a half. Let me ask you all, there are so many questions here. Are there any questions that you were just dying to have me answer that I haven't answered yet? Can you please type them in the chat window so I can make sure I get to those? And Greg, is there anything that I didn't cover that you were expecting?
Not that I was expecting, but here's a question that a lot of people ask me, and you have more experience than me in this, so I want to ask you. How did you know it was time for you to make the move from being an employee to an independent consultant?
That transition was slow, and for me it was slow. And I was lucky enough. Actually, one of my professors in the program had a contract. Someone was looking for help on a contract, and they said, hey, I know someone who would be really good for that. And so she recommended me, and I took on the contract, and at the time that wasn't something I was thinking about doing. And it was fantastic, and I loved it. And that was the start of a very gradual transition. And my closest partner that I work with, she made the transition to being external just sort of in a week. She just decided it was time because she had so much work that she couldn't be a good employee anymore, and she really decided that her heart was in being a consultant. I think what I love most about that is that, I'm a little bit ADD, right? And so in being external, I get to work with such diverse people and such varied content and subject matter, and it's not the same thing over and over again. And because the content is always fresh, or the organization or culture is fresh, I never have a chance to be complacent. I never have a chance to get stagnant. And so that was what attracted me more than anything else. And I'd say, in addition to that, when I knew that working with my partners, like Elaine that I mentioned, was going to be, what was the upside to being out on my own, that I got to work with people who were passionate about the same things I was, then I knew that that was the decision I had to make. Question on the private sector versus the public sector. I'll be very honest, I have not done public sector work in a while, a few years. And so from a process standpoint on, bidding on government contracts and things like that, I'm not your expert. But there's benefits as far as the experience. I will say I worked for the Defense Information School at Fort Meade for a year on a contract, and I was an instructional designer with them. And working with the military leaders at that base was so much fun, and the content was so different, and people were just so respectful. As one example, like I've had fun at and I've been challenged at any given contract in new and exciting ways. I think the private sector is a little bit easier to navigate for me personally as a consultant, because I've spent most of my time here recently in the private sector, and so I'm a little bit more comfortable in that world. I'm a little bit more comfortable when I can talk about the bottom line and profit versus nonprofit, but the work, the work on the other side is also pretty invigorating and motivating. So that's on the public versus private comment, that's the best I can give you. How do I prioritize requests for training projects? I have my own personal goals as an individual. I have my own IDP. I also have business goals. So what my business mix is, how much of my business I want to come in for instructional design work versus coaching clients versus building mentoring programs. I have about 6 different lines of business, and so I have goals there. So when I get a contact or a lead, or someone reaches out to me and says, hey, we're looking to work with someone on this, then I look at if that partnership is going to fit into my goals, and if not, then I always try and make sure that I have someone I can point them in the direction to and not just say no. Do I make bids on projects? Yes. I mean, I submit proposals to projects or to potential projects all the time. I will say that my most successful projects and the ones that have been most rewarding for me have come from referrals. Knock on wood, I think a consultant lives and dies by their reputation. And when I do a great work with one of my partner clients, they're going to go tell their peers and their friends and the other people in that business that they worked with someone and she was a great partner and she came in under budget or whatever it might be. And that person will reach out to me. And those have always been the most successful client relationships I've had versus more of a cold introduction. I certainly do have to do that, but actually one of you asked what the worst part of consulting is for me, and it's business development. I don't think anybody gets into this kind of work to say, yeah, I want to drum up new business. That's just, if I was a salesperson, I would go work for a sales organization. I'd probably get paid a whole lot more. I'm not a salesperson. I'm a learning professional. So that's what I would rather do, but we don't all get that luxury. Yes, thank you. I do. I think of my clients as partners. That's really important because they drive everything, right? They drive how the project goes. They drive the expectations of the project. They drive, what success is going to look like. So that has to be the mentality if I'm going to be successful. But I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, do I feel secure in the position as a consultant? So I have been known to tell my business coach over the years that the fear, of course, is not that I'm going to do a bad job when I have the contract. It's going to be whether or not the contracts are going to come in, just being honest. So, yeah, it's shakier as a consultant than as an employee. But I truly believe that a lot of the projects and a lot of the things that we have going on in our space don't require an internal person for an organization, that it's better done short-term by an external consultant rather than paying an employee full-time for a variety of reasons. And I think I love being able to provide that value when I can. So, yeah, knock on wood, so far it's been great. How did I get the Defense Information School project? It must have been advertised. So it was a subcontractor. I worked for a company and not directly for the military. So I was under a contract for their, the contractor worked bid on the contract, and then they hired people onto the contract, and that's how I got it. And I think the company was called Abacus, I think maybe was the company that was a year long. But keep your eyes out on message boards. Keep your eyes out on if you have any friends who are in that space, ask them who the vendors and contractors are there, and get those names and start scoping out their websites. Yeah, it was a great project. Oh, there is well, this isn't military, but it's government. There is a company that I've worked with before, not as a contractor, but I worked directly with this company called Federal Management Partners. And they do learning projects for the government, different government agencies. So you might want to look at them as well. Okay. Well, Greg, it looks like the questions have slowed down. Again, everyone, I'll get those in the next day or two. I'll get those slides over to Greg, and they'll have my email address on them. And let me know if you have any other questions that I didn't answer. And I appreciate your time tonight. I really enjoyed it.
Jennifer, thank you very much. It was terrific.
Thank you.
Very responsive to people's questions, and it moved very, very quickly. Thank you so much.
Great. Okay, well, I'll just sign off here and let you do your thing, and I'll get that information over to you soon.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Okay, everyone. When I get Jennifer's slides and the other information, I will make sure to post them on the Blackboard site. So I think what you'll see is anybody seen any themes with presenters? I don't really have any preconceived ideas. I'm just wondering what people are thinking. Self-driven, partnership, collaboration, networking. Yeah, that's definitely important. Those are good ideas. Yeah, I guess one of the things that I've learned is that a lot of people, when they're just starting to find out about our field, they think that it's all about training and instructional design, and then the more they get into it, the more they see that it's lots of other things like performance improvement and project management and the business aspect of things. Yeah, everyone has some great ideas here. Everyone's chatting in. I'm seeing Layla's, maybe I'm particularly listening for it, but I keep hearing design development is less important than what you actually create. Yeah, I can see where people are saying that. So those are great thoughts. Well, folks, any other questions before we say goodnight? More work under the surface, right, Beverly? I agree. Focus on self-development. Yeah, you never finish, you never stop growing, do you, Tracy? That's a good point. Okay, folks. Well, if we don't have anything else, I'm going to say goodnight, and we'll see you next week. All right, Patrick, you can email me a question. That's fine. Very good. Happy 4th of July to everyone. Good night now.